Tracks are the core of Logic Pro, and knowing how to use them and kind of implement them is fundamental. So the first thing we need to look at is actually how to create new tracks. So let's just pull your attention to a couple of hidden buttons. So here's our track area here, and you have this plus button and this plus that looks like it's encapsulated by some kind of folder system. Now, with this track selected, if you click on this plus with a folder type thing, it will duplicate the track, which is really handy if you want to just try some extra things out or double up tracks to make them more beefy. If you want to delete a track, just press the delete button on your keyboard. Next thing we have is this plus button. This is how you create a new track. We're just going to look at software instruments and audio, okay? So we're just going to look at these two tabs here. But you can keep coming to this and you can keep pressing the plus item and you create all 200 tracks if you want to. So software instrument, then let's bring your attention down to this bit here. Now it says empty channel strip at the moment, but as you can see, you can actually choose any instrument you want from this category list, which is really useful. However, if you do that, when you get to your library in just a moment, you will only see the presets for that particular instrument. If you leave it on empty channel strip, it gives you the full breadth and depth of everything that's available for software instruments. So let's just leave it on that. Let's make sure we've got an output. The final thing that you can do, I rarely do, but you can do, is change the number of tracks that you create. So you can create 10 tracks if you want to. Let's just leave it at 1 for now and press create. You can see this brings up the new track. So this is completely different from this one. And every time you put an instrument on this track, it will be different from this one. Quite an obvious concept, but you'll be surprised at how many people don't get that at first. So let's come over to the library. Here are all the different categories of sounds, and because we chose that kind of empty channel, we get the use of every single instrument available. So if we go, for instance, orchestra, and then say, I don't know, let's go strings and choose a string sound, we then now have a nice string sound. It does take quite a little bit of time to load sometimes, depending on how fast your computer is. So now let's press the keyboard and see what happens. Oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? And we can record that. Now, this is what I meant by tracks. If I select this top one and press my keyboard, you'll see that's obviously a piano. And if I click on this one, it's obviously strings. I'm not fixed to that, however, so let me record something. So I press record, it gives me a nice little 4-beat counting. And press stop. I use the spacebar then also to stop, but you can obviously press stop up here as well. Now I think to myself, well, actually I don't want cinema strings anymore. If you come back over to the library, you can use this little scroll bar to take yourself all the way back to the beginning and say, you know what, let's try it on a mallet instrument. Vibraphone. Now let's see how this works. Press play again. Press stop. And you can see that that's a completely different instrument. So you're not fixed, because it's a software instrument, you're not fixed to the sound that you create, which is really handy. Another thing that you can do with software instruments and audio instruments is come over to the loops panel, which is this button here. And you've got all the same categories. So you can go, okay, let's have a look at mallets. And then you can scroll through. Now, remember, blue is for audio, green is for software instrument. So let's just sample this one, so have a listen to it. Okay, that's nice. If we click and drag, now if we was to click and drag it here, it would put it on a piano. Let's try that. Oh no, it did change it, which is useful. In the old version, it used to kind of override that. So you used to have to create a new track, like just pulling it in to anywhere, but it takes those parameters into consideration now, which is really cool. So let's delete that. And once again, you can do the same with audio tracks. So let's drag this one in. But one thing I want to show you straight away is this is obviously an audio track. So if we solo it, you see there it is. Now, if we pull that same one and put it on our instrument track, it will not work. So here we go again. And the reason for this is instrument tracks and audio tracks do not play well together. They do have to be two different things. It's really important to remember that. Let's move on. So the next thing we might want to do is actually change some of the parameters of the actual track. So the first thing is these kind of complex areas. As you get more advanced, you will use these more and more. And they're very, very useful for just kind of diagnostics and adding some depth to your track. But we're going to leave them alone at the moment. And we're going to look at the channel strip, okay, which is this. Every single instrument has a channel strip. Now let me just create another channel and you'll see this in action. So here's the audio one. Here is the software instrument one. So we have the preset that we've chosen from our library. Then we have our EQ. Then we have MIDI effects. Then we have the actual instrument. Now if you double click on this, you will see that's what the instrument looks like. So if you want to do some deeper editing later on, you can come and play around with that. Then you have all the different effects. And these are dynamic processors and they take over 100% of the actual channel, and we'll discuss that later. And here we have the aux buses, which are different kind of effects and channels. Then we have our output. Then we have our automation area. Now finally we have our panning and we have our volume meter. So this is common across all tracks. And if I click on this one, you'll notice that the volume goes back to this and the panning goes back to this area. So they are completely separate. Now what panning means is that you can have the sound of that instrument just coming out of one speaker. So if I hit it hard over to this area, it will only come out of the right speaker. And if I hit it hard over to this area, it will only come out of the left speaker. If I pull this all the way down, it will no longer play. And then I can go up. Every single channel has this master output. And no matter what, if I pull this down, you'll see that it goes across all channels. I tend to leave this at 0 and I tend not to touch it. It's the one on the left that we're concerning ourselves with. So just to reiterate then, that's how you create tracks with the plus button. You can do the same with software and audio. Now finally, to create empty containers, you can right click or control click and you can say add audio file, or you can right click on the MIDI track or the software instrument track and say create empty MIDI region. This is very useful if you want to type in your notes here, okay? Two more things before we finish this lesson is if we hover over this container, on the top corner you'll see this little rounded icon. This is a loop icon and we can drag this out to create a 1-bar loop. Now if I click back over here and I enter a note down here, you'll see that although I've just entered one note, it's actually populated the whole thing. Let me pull that back and I'll show that in another way. If I hover over the bottom right hand corner, I get this square bracket. If I pull that out, I can make a 4-bar and then I can loop using the rounded one, and now I've got a 4-bar loop. Okay, so that's quite interesting as well. That brings me to the end of this lesson, so I'll see you in the next one.